Hey guys, we're back with more Barrack Saga, and today I'm going to be doing Sidequest 11.1, and unlike previous side quests, in this map we're actually allowed to bring Reese and Ward. I say allowed, Reese is forced, but Ward can also come if I want him to. And this is also true of 12.1, which is the side quest in the next chapter, so that's going to be a bit different. And in some ways, these maps also kind of count as main missions, because events that wait until after the main mission of the game also get pushed back until after these side quests, apparently. Anyway, Enid is now using the liquid magic to finally hit her promotion requirements, so that event will happen at the start of the next chapter. And then the next thing we need to do is hire some mercenaries. We need to bring Percival, Owen, and Faramir along, and Faramir in particular is kind of galling because I've already recruited Faye, so he should be joining after the main mission, but again, because this kind of counts as a main mission, he's not going to be permanently recruited until after this, and so I have to pay for him one more time. The last unit we hire is Thaddy, and I actually kind of messed up a little bit with him, because at the start of the last chapter, if I had hired him for the full 800, he should have joined after that chapter. But what ended up happening is, in my test run, I paid the 800 and then saw that the event to recruit him wasn't showing up. So instead of thinking, maybe this is like those other events that only happen after the main mission, instead I was like, oh no, he's actually never going to join me, something went wrong, and so I didn't end up hiring him, and that means I had to hire him for 400 last chapter, and then again for 400 this chapter. But he will be permanently joining us after this map, so that's a good thing done. As far as my preparations go otherwise, there's nothing particularly important. The only real thing there is Enid giving away her items to Volo, and Volo also taking the Kolishmard, which I'll talk about in more detail later on. For now, let's start talking about the map, which you haven't seen yet, but this is a seas map in which Reese has to get to the top of an island and seize a point. And it is also a fog of war map. So there is lots and lots of fun to be had in that. And another interesting feature of this map is that there are cliffs all over the place, and Reese is not able to walk up cliffs while he is mounted. In the preparations for this map, you will see a couple of units who are not in the preps list. One of these is Sienna, who is the Princess of Varia, and she is pretty bad. She has 18 HP and zeros in every other stat. And then of course Laurentia is there as well. Neither of these units are actually going to feature on the map. And in Sienna's case, that's actually a good thing, obviously, because trying to protect someone with stats that garbage would have been a real pain. But Laurentia would have made this map a whole lot easier, because, as I'm sure you're well aware by now, flying is overpowered in this game, and the map design really would allow for her to be powerful, so that's annoying. One thing that is all over this map is a bunch of enemy archers, and this is why I brought both Percival and Kramer, once again for their arrowbane skill. And Percival baits out one such archer, and manages to deal some damage back to it, thanks to Thunder actually having 2 range. The vast majority of my units are going to be pressing directly east towards the ford that we need to take in order to get Reese to the siege point, but a couple of my units are actually diverting to the north. And the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that I deployed Esteban in this map, which is weird because it's Esteban. But the reason for this is that Esteban has the scotopic skill, which gives him 1 extra point of fog of war vision. And they're going to head north because in the middle of this map there is a lighthouse tile with an axe guard sitting on it, and the purpose of a lighthouse is to give a significant increase to a unit's fog of war vision, which is a great boon in this map. Normal units sitting on the lighthouse generally don't give quite enough fog of war vision to reveal a couple of really important units to see, but fortunately the Lighthouse Extra Vision stacks with Esteban's Scotopic, so he can reveal the units that we want to know about. And additionally, a lighthouse counts as protective terrain, meaning that Esteban is able to hide on it. And that means that he is not a valid target to be attacked by any enemies for the duration of the map, keeping him far safer than the rest of my units. Of course, I'm not the only one making use of the hide skill on this map. There are a ton of enemies all over this, which are also hidden from view, and they are a real pain to deal with. There is only one way for units without swimmer to get to the northern half of the island, and that's a ford that you can see at the eastern edge of the map. And next to that ford there are 2 forest tiles, and both of these tiles contain a hidden crossbow unit with Overwatch, and that means that we have to be pretty careful with how we get across that. The last really frustrating feature of this map is the fact that there are 2 ballisticians on it, and one of them is covering the ford as well. So we're going to be taking a substantial amount of fire as we try and force it open. And this is where Laurentia would really come in handy, because there's another ballistician up next to the boss, and she would be able to easily neutralize it if she was allowed to be deployed on this map. But instead we have to do this, and I chose Alvina to rush onto the ford and trigger the Overwatch enemies. This costs the Paladin shield, but she doesn't take all that much damage from that initial assault. However, she does then take a fairly big hit from the enemy ballistician, and I'm less concerned for her than for her horse, because having an 8-move horse around has been extremely helpful, and I do not want to see that thing die before I've squeezed all the use I can out of it. There are a couple of side objectives on this map that I do not go for. One of those is in the lower left. There is a hidden bandit who is a bounty target, and on the other side of the bottom half of the island there is a treasure chest. I have no idea what this treasure chest contains, because it's also surrounded by hidden enemies that are protecting it, and I've never seen any purpose in deploying a thief on this map. So that's just going to be one of life's little mysteries, I suppose. So now we see the main reason why I brought my Arrowbane units, as Kramer walks straight through the choke point, dodging the enemy with Overwatch and then killing the other one, eliminating a good half of the threat here. We still want to get through and kill the other guy before he re-overwatches, but fortunately Alvina is right next to him, and she gets some pretty good RNG blessing over this turn, because she manages to dodge a fairly accurate ballista hit, and then she lands both of her 56% fauchard hits to kill the crossbow dude and break this choke point once and for all. Her level up RNG is a little less impressive, but honestly I would prefer to have a living Alvina with bad stats than a dead Alvina, so I think that works out. The next thing we need to do is have Reese climb up the cliffs, and in order to do that he has to dismount, and he goes very slowly up there. So this is going to allow some of my infantry units to catch up and eventually overtake him to deal with some of the threats that are still coming. And part of that is this honest to goodness trade chain that I am doing with the Volo. This is probably the only one I've done in the entire game, and we are doing that in order to get the Kolishmard forward onto Faramir with his excellent 5 movement. Dean also takes the war pick that Volo got from killing the enemy axe guard that was sitting on the lighthouse, which is handy because Dean's own warhook is getting pretty worn down by this point. Owen is here because I did eventually realize that I would need a healer on this map, and Owen is the best healer that I have. You can imagine that it would be a real challenge if I decided to deploy, say, Saphira instead. That just would not have worked out. Reese triggers another one of these stupid Overwatch archers. He gets hit and poisoned, which isn't the most ideal, but it doesn't end up costing me anything, so it works out. Now Kramer is free to head up the cliff and attack the ballistician. He uses the Balmung because he has a pretty good chance of getting a critical hit and just killing, but instead, in this instance, he actually did one better and did a one-hit cripple on the ballistician, which completely eliminates it, similarly to a crit, without needing any other units, while also leaving it there occupying its space. And now that the ballistician is dealt with, we can start moving my more fragile units such as Owen closer in so they can continue to be helpful throughout the rest of the clear. I chose Kramer to do this hit because he has the climber skill, and this allows him to not have his avoid reduced to 0 on the cliffs. However, he managed to get hit anyway, even through Arrowbane, which I think is really annoying. But, you know, I've had some good RNG already, so it's fine. At this stage, because Reese needs to step up onto the cliffs on this turn, I need to try and delay the action of the enemy axe guard that is sitting just above the ballistician before Reese moves in, because otherwise Reese would have 0 avoid and he'd be at real risk of taking a hit that he cannot survive with the poison that is currently active on him. But once the axe guard has his go, Reese moves on up and uses a vulnerary to heal, and next turn he is going to be pretty safe. I've mentioned the Kolishmard briefly, but Faramir is going to be making good use of it for the remainder of this map. It's basically a Brave Rapier with pretty much exactly identical stats, including the Ignoring Shields property and also the fairly high crit rate. So this is a great weapon and we're going to be wanting to use it for quite a while. And Faramir's 5 movement and lack of being slowed down by cliffs means he's the best choice for it on this particular map. So we are now at the midpoint of the map. The first few major hurdles have been cleared, and so now we need to move on to what's on the upper levels, because there are some fairly difficult enemies still waiting for us. The first of these that you will notice is the Lance Knight. As usual, I'm terrified of Lance Knights. This guy is a named Lance Knight called Lyle, and he is going to be baited around so that we never have to really face him. Kramer moves into range of 2 more irritating enemies, a couple of bow riders, and his Arrowbane is usually going to keep him safe up there. Faramir now moves from his position on the cliffs across to deal with an enemy priest who has an annoying tome and has been the cause of many resets in the course of this map for me. Speaking of resets, Faramir is also in position to bait out a sword enemy, and he needs to dodge and deal some significant damage to this guy because he has pursuit, and if he can move to attack Percival, he will just completely kill him, so we don't want to do that. Kramer is keeping Balmung equipped because it gives the parry skill, and that's just an extra chance to avoid damage, which is really necessary up here. And now Percival is moving in to attack Lyle, starting the arduous process of chipping him down, which is going to carry on over the next few turns because Lyle is extremely bulky. And then Reese is going to move forward a bit and use the Vanish Stone. And the Vanish Stone is a special item that essentially hides the unit from the enemy AI on any terrain. And this is really important because there are a couple of nasty enemies, including the ballistician that I've gone on about at length, up on the uppermost part, and Reese has to survive up there in order to seize in the lowest turn count. So we use the Vanish Stone to just make him invisible to the AI. Faramir managed to dodge the sword guy as we needed and put some big hits on him. However, he didn't get a crit, which is a bit unfortunate. I would have liked to have a crit there, but never mind. We can still have an opportunity to kill him because Percival doesn't want to get murdered brutally, so instead he runs ahead and brutally murders the sword guy preemptively. So that's him sorted out. And the next thing we need to do is wait a bit until Lyle uses up his action. From this point, Lyle pretty much sits right next to the boss for the remainder of the map, unless one of our units is within his range at the start of his turn, then he'll move to attack. And we do not want that space to be occupied by Lyle. We also don't want him moving to attack our squishy units or getting in Reese's way because Reese is currently invisible. So we're going to delay a bit and have some of our other units take actions first. And what I do with those rear units is mostly just tidying up a couple of enemy units, although you will notice that I'm just leaving the ballistician sitting there crippled with nowhere to go. And the reason for that is that my rearguard units aren't actually my rearest rearguard. They still need to keep moving forward in order to engage the remaining enemies at the top, as well as the boss. So we need to keep them moving forward, and Volo will sort out capturing the ballistician later on. Dean traded away his vulnerary during this turn and then immediately got whacked by the ballistician, but fortunately Owen can just move up and heal him, and it really comes to nothing, so that's pretty good. And then finally Lyle takes his action, and so Faramir steps on up to deal some damage to him, using the Kolishmard obviously to avoid his shield. And that goes well and all, but there's no crits, and then my Kolishmard just breaks. So I carried on from this because this is a extremely unreliable clear, as you can probably guess, and I expected to have to reset over this anyway, but it didn't work out that way. So rip one of the best weapons I've seen so far in this game, I guess, and I'm sure we will have no need for it at all in future maps. Kramer moves in to finish Lyle off because the Balmung is so powerful that he can do that even if Lyle ends up shield blocking, which is pretty great. Unfortunately, this opens up space for Faramir, who is now unarmed, to be targeted by both of the enemy bow riders, and he gets hit by one of them and that poisons him. And as you're probably aware by now, poison is kind of scary in this game. I think it deals a percentage of your HP each turn, and that's terrifying because it can still kill you. So Faramir is now in a really precarious position. It's now pretty much time for us to move in against the boss, but I'm a little indecisive over doing it for a couple of reasons, because I'm going to be attacking with Percival, but Percival is really good bait for the ballista because he can be one-hit KO'd by it, but also has Arrowbane, so he's fairly likely to dodge it. And the other reason is that I want Reese to move first so that Percival can attack within range of Reese's commander skill. So what we do is we move our back units around a bit until the ballistician finally decides to attack Percival, and then we can move Reese in, and then we can have Percival move in to finally attack the boss. Now, this boss has been extremely frustrating for me. You'll see in a moment that I decide to have Percival whip out his Dire Thunder Orb, even though he has Thunder as well. And the reason for that is that I have had such bad experiences trying to get this kill with Percival just using Thunder. You can see that he has about 80% hit rate with his Dire Thunder, and Thunder has basically the exact same stats. But the thing is, a good half of my attacks with Thunder against this boss had missed prior to me giving up and finally trying Dire Thunder on this attempt. So Beric Saga RNG kind of works in some painful ways sometimes, and so I think Dire Thunder did go to a good cause here. I would have liked to keep it intact for a later map with the recruitment requirement, but though I didn't realize it at this point, that did end up being unnecessary, so it worked out. Dean is continuing to advance forward, and the reason for that is that his Warpick is the most reliable means of getting through the enemy boss's shield, other than magic, and the only magic I have is Percival, and he's already had his go. So Dean needs to get in to finish the boss off. And now Faramir is once again targeted by both of the bow riders, which is really good because that means he's gonna die and I'm gonna get to reset and get my Kolishmard back, right? Right? Come on Faramir, be a sport. Oh wait, no, he's dodging. So Faramir somehow manages to dodge both of these, and the second one ends up cantering back into Rhys, which means Rhys attacks him, but this is kind of pointless because it means that Rhys is now revealed for the ballistician to attack, which isn't great. And also this guy isn't on low health, so Rhys doesn't manage to get a kill out of it even. It's kind of annoying. So the last thing I should point out in this map is the other ballistician has a winch, which is a crafting item that we can use to upgrade Silvis's Chukonu into a rapid crossbow. And we kind of want to get that, and because I have the actions free on Faramir, not needing him to use the Kolishmard against the boss, I have had him shoot down that guy, and that means we get the winch, which is pretty good. And really, that's all there is left to say. So the boss has been killed pretty easily, really. Kramer picks off one of the enemy bow riders to get a kill. Volo manages to get hit by a 17% to cap off the map, which is just kind of funny, really. And then Faramir kills the ballistician, and Rhys moves into Seas to complete this map in 8 turns. There's an extensive amount of cutscenes after this, and the end of all of that is that Laurentia is going to not be available until the start of the next chapter, but we have our ways around that. So that's all for now. I will see you next time.